This video, this commentary is not just about one general.
Hi, Michael.
It is about a long history of the destruction of Africa, political manipulation, assassination, arrogance of a superpower.
America first.
And ultimately, the awakening of the black populations across the world. Stay with me and I'll tell you exactly why that is the case.
I can imagine a situation, though, in which the ruling elite of a country is receiving gratuities on the side that inure to the benefit of the strongman leader and not to the populace of the country. Does that sort of corruption and bribery go on with regard to the Belt and Road?
Absolutely, Chairman. I see this, and I don't mind calling them out, but Captain Traore and Burkina Faso.
Now consider this. General Langley was asked a very direct question, whether China is actually greasing hands of African leaders, corrupt leaders on the continent, to get the projects done. So essentially it was a question about China's influence on the continent of Africa. But instead, what did General Langley do? He pivoted back to an unrelated question, Ibrahim Traore, and then he spoke about Burkina Faso gold. Where is the connection? A very strange response, if I may add. And if you're familiar with how the Western narratives are spun, then the beginning of a narrative is such as what General Langley did at that hearing. And because General Langley is a black man in uniform, his response about a brother, the leader of Burkina Faso, cut a lot deeper.
Their gold reserves, that is all those proceeds are just in exchange to protect the junta regime.
Many on the continent and black diaspora viewed him not just as an AFRICOM officer. No, they saw him as a symbol of betrayal, a sellout. They saw him as the very face of neocolonialism, dressed in an African skin. And so with those sentiments from General Langley, he kicked up a storm.
Traore.
Stop, darling. You've been eating out of the cooking jar too long.
Demonstrations across New York, across London, Bridgetown, Kingston, Jamaica, Ouagadougou, Joburg, South Africa. Blacks came out in solidarity, something totally unprecedented in human history. But this is not new. In 1961, the founding Prime Minister of Congo DRC, Patrice Lumumba, was assassinated through the help of US and Belgian authorities. These two nations are complicit in this very tragic chapter of Congo DRC from the very onset. And so Congo, or Zaire, renamed by President Mobutu, a country that is rich beyond measure, was plundered for decades and left in the hands of warlords as citizens go through helpless and traumatic experiences. A good 4 decades now. And yet, the Western powers called this freedom. This was never really true independence. Neocolonialism came back clothed in multinational corporations, and Africa became a bastion for extraction of minerals that has continued to date. We all know it's theft, executed by puppets that the Western regimes put in place, while citizens of those nations have continued to suffer. Look at the Sahel region.
Crossing the Sahara in search of a better life.
The stories are similar.
These migrants are bound
It
for
then
Europe.
explains why the jihadists have continued to work in those regions, because the environment allows that. Fast forward, Iraq. The year is 1991, and Saddam Hussein unfortunately had invaded Kuwait. So Saddam Hussein was an aggressor, and this time around coalition forces who also got the backing of China and Russia. The very few times America ever got the backing of China and Russia. Invade Iraq and kick out Saddam Hussein from Kuwait.
Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours.
It is 2003. We hear of the Second Gulf War. This time round, a war that is waged against a falsehood, a narrative that has been spanned by America's President George Bush and UK's Tony Blair over fake weapons of mass destruction. An allegation that in 2004 resulted in the death of the UK scientist, Dr. Kelly. This all under the backdrop of 9/11. 9/11 happened in 2001, a terror attack that was blamed on Al-Qaeda. And so America, reeling through this very painful and difficult experience, many lives lost, and George Bush needed to flex America's military might to reassure American citizens, to push or point the blame in a certain direction. Reports later indicated that there was no link between President Saddam Hussein, weapons of mass destruction, nor did he have any link with Al-Qaeda. So America needed a new enemy, a new war, much like what they did in Vietnam. Unfortunately, by the time the truth was coming out, Saddam Hussein was no more and Iraq was in shambles. It was too late.
Saddam was threatening the US with weapons of mass destruction?
Yes.
When? That's news to me, I'm sorry.
Obviously, I wish I didn't help sell a war that went on to cause such destruction and pain for so many.
Iraq, a broken nation, had now become a breeding ground for terror groups, marauding gangs, patronage politics, puppet administration installed by America. So you can imagine the damage it did to livelihoods, millions displaced. And this is the playbook that, honestly, America is pushing towards Africa. Let's go to Libya, once a prosperous nation in Africa. Yes, Gaddafi was no angel. Gaddafi was no saint. And we all remember what happened. The Lockerbie disaster in Scotland, the plane that was brought down, and Libya was found responsible for it. But President Muammar Gaddafi had Libya running prosperous. He had a vision for the continent of Africa, not just for Libya. He also had a vision for Africa. The idea to have a single currency that would empower African nations. The Western powers, NATO, all the rest of them were not happy about what Muammar Gaddafi was doing. President Reagan called him the mad dog. And so many years later, the Arab Spring is happening. And when it reaches Libya, African Union pushes for negotiated peace and for Muammar Gaddafi to exit peacefully and leave the country still as a functioning state. NATO and the US placed an embargo. There was a no-fly zone on the Libyan airspace, effectively making it impossible for the African leaders to reach Libya and make any meaningful rescue. In the end, Libya exploded. Gaddafi was taken out, and it was celebrated in the Western media. The Libya that we know today is a failed state, and the Sahel region continues to burn today because of the chaos that allowed terror to spread in Libya and eventually trickle into the Sahel region, including Burkina Faso. And yet, as all this happens, the nation states that were responsible for what happened in Libya have never been held to account. Certainly no accountability, no justice for the citizens of those regions.
We were the ones that caused Gaddafi's death because Hillary Clinton played a game over there, and I was the one that went over there during the war. Gaddafi asked me to come over. I took a Biden staffer and a Bush staffer and a film crew leader from ABC One in New York, Larry Menti, with me, and a cameraman, because I didn't want the CIA to set me up. I hand carried the letter back from Gaddafi offering to resign.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Let's talk about France. The French and the CFA franc, a colonial chain disguised as a currency that has been used within the West African states, certainly within the Sahel region. France has collected more than half of the combined GDP of all these African states, something that Dr. Rikana Shiombori has often referred to as daylight robbery.
What's needed is complete separation. France has got to get out of Africa, really, honestly. Enough is enough.
Insisting that it is time that France is kicked out of Africa. That is precisely what President Ibrahim Traore has done. And by doing that, he is taking away the power of the Western nations to constantly extract resources at a song, a few pennies. Resources that they use, such as gold, uranium, which powers the French grid, Paris, lit up while citizens of these nation states continue to live in darkness, continue to live in abject poverty, a third world country, so to speak, funding a first world country. French troops apparently have been fighting terrorism in the Sahel region. Maybe they have had some wins, but they have generally failed to stop the jihadists, despite their weaponry, their technology. What is interesting to note that in this entire period of time, the resource extraction in these regions where the French troops are based has continued uninterrupted, which tells you that the agenda to fight security, if you can read between the lines, is something else. And so the old trick in the book has been executed, and the spin on Burkina Faso is precisely what General Langley was doing at that Congress hearing. The Congress hearing merely provided an opportunity to lay the ground for what could really be an effort to get rid of Burkina Faso's leadership and allow for a puppet to be installed in that country. But Burkina Faso is saying that what civilian leadership has failed to do, perhaps military leadership can do better, because over the period of time, the leadership of Burkina Faso have tended to work at the behest of the French state. That is precisely what Blaise Compaoré did in Ouagadougou.
As I've said in previous testimony, Africa remains a nexus theater from which the United States cannot afford to shift its gaze.
Now, AFRICOM and NATO and colonial powers are definitely struggling to retain control within Africa. But that moment is gone. The world has certainly changed, and Africa is no longer going to be silent. China, the underdog, is now a major player in geopolitics. And it's precisely because of China's influence in Africa that America picked on a smaller nation, Burkina Faso, where they can project their power. Langley suggested at the Congress hearing that America owns the ideas and that China and Russia apparently own the narrative. But the reality on the ground is that China specifically, and even by extension Russia, own the new ideas for bilateral exchange. And the Western nations have been left with the narrative, the spin around what China has been doing on the continent with regards to their bridge and road initiative. History has proved to us that powerful Western nations always act in their own interests. What international relations calls realism, that individual nation states will always act in their best interest at whatever cost. From Lumumba in Congo DRC to Gaddafi in Libya, and now Burkina Faso, that General Langley seems to be targeting. The script, the age-old script, has barely changed. But today, something is definitely different. Thanks to the very words of this American general, who happens to be black, Africans worldwide and black diaspora have today united in anger, in purpose, in hope, in a call for dignity. General Langley may have been projecting American power, but in the end,
In Burkina Faso.
he sparked a major global black awakening, unprecedented. In this irony, this very strange twist of fate that brought two black men in a tango, lies a very fundamental truth, that sometimes the words of your enemy could just be the trigger that Africa needed to wake up and act on something that has been long overdue. So I ask again, is Langley an enemy of Africa? Or is this brother a blessing in disguise? This is a story that has been dear to my heart. I must say that. Something I'm passionate about, Pan-Africanism, and a call to all black people across the world. So if this story resonates with you, please share it. Subscribe, ring that bell, speak up, because history, for once, is being rewritten. And we need to be present in that moment. We are reshaping the narrative. We are taking back our power of agency, our ability to control. And that is what Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traore represents to all black people across the world. Many thanks for watching. I hope it has made sense to you. Please share your thoughts in the comments. How better can we take this story forward? Many thanks for watching, and please check out this other video here. Hope you're inspired. Peace. I'm out.